Good morning, Revolution, and welcome to our show this morning. Scott and Rosanna and Cameron. Cameron is joining us here in New York. It's his first time around. Welcome, Cameron. How you doing this morning?
Thanks. Good.
Good, 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 good. We're talking infant formula shortage. Can you imagine in this day and age they can't produce enough infant formula to feed our babies? There was actually, there were a number of different shootings this week. Um, One in Tulsa and then some other places. We'll be talking about that. California passed a law. No, they set up a committee that recommended reparations to state assembly be paid to African Americans. That's a big development. And then finally, we're going to be talking about Biden's saber rattling directed at the People's Republic of China over the issue of Taiwan. And then finally, we got a couple questions in our mailbag. So let's get this party started. Rosanna, you read about the infant formula shortage. Um, in a certain sense, it's really no one's fault because there was, and part of it was for good intentions. The one factory was shut down, I read, because there was fears that the formula was contaminated. And then there were some supply chain issues. They're chartering jets to bring in formula from other countries, um, and that will help. However, how much do you got to pay for it? Because there's price gouging. You know, they're jacking up the price in order to make super profits due to the shortage. Can you imagine, Rosanna? They're making mothers pay more for baby formula, infant
Yeah,
formula.
I don't think people realize that unless you're buying the formula, it was already very expensive. Just
Hmm.
very very expensive, and now now the profit seekers are seeing the way to gouge, just like everything else, trying to gouge it. But I think also we should point out that um, there are very few companies that produce the formula, and so it goes back to this monopoly of products that gives them that advantage, but then also has this added issue of being the only ones, and so now there's this shortage, and many babies, we don't know what the effects are going to happen. They're not able to feed. Some mothers are not able to breastfeed like as they would want to. So the formula is really, really important.
Very, very important. Scott, is this just a one-off? Maybe one or two, you know, uh, companies, one or two retailers, in one or two parts of the country. Sometimes people are opportunistic, or is there something more fundamentally wrong with the way uh, this problem is emerging? Is it an accident or is it something else?
Always a combination, right? You know, there's accidents. There are things that occur that are unpredictable, and then there's the capacity of a system to handle them. And what has become more and more clear, which Marxists have understood for a long time, is that our system, capitalism, or their system, I should say, the system of the United States ruling class, is not capable of handling these accidents that arrive. Any minor disruption can become a major national crisis. Um, but I was asking my wife about how this might happen in Cuba. Like, would there be an infant formula shortage? Um, because people are always saying, "Oh, the market is what enables access to all these goods." Like in Cuba, there are shortages of everything, and I assumed the answer was going to be, "Of course not. There are never infant formula shortages." But it was a little more complicated than that. What she told me, so my wife is a family practice doctor who trained, went to medical school in Cuba, lived there for 6 years. And she said the reason there aren't shortages of infant formula there are because just about everyone breastfeeds. But breastfeeding is not a thing that's easy. It's not a thing that everyone can just do right off the bat. So in Cuba, there is, I believe, a year of parental leave. There's support for breastfeeding. So the system is set up to make sure that everybody who can breastfeed does so, that the need for formula is minimized, and then the resources are able to be directed, to people who really can't. Whereas in the United States, we have people going back to work 3 days after, a week, 2 weeks after giving birth, um, and they don't have time to learn to breastfeed, to help the baby learn to breastfeed. We don't have systematic, comprehensive support for stuff like that. So that's another aspect of this systemic side of things. The market is not a good way of regulating this, and also we don't have ways of promoting, of minimizing the need for formula.
Cameron, I read this morning that the Attorney General of the state of New York issued a warning to 30 retail companies against price gouging. What in the hell is going on in New York?
Well, yeah, I mean, thankfully we have a progressive attorney general that's willing to hold, companies accountable for trying to make profits off of people's need. Um, I think definitely, across the country, the government should play a bigger role in regulating prices on essential supplies. I mean, food for babies, you'd think.
But isn't it uh, part of the essential nature of capitalism for businesses not only to seek a profit, but to seek the highest profit possible? I mean, isn't there some kind of law, economic law that Marx and Engels discovered, law of the maximization of profit? It's not that you just should make a profit, but that you have to make the largest, uh, most sustained profit margin that you possibly can in order to survive. It's not uh, so much the intent of or the necessarily the greed of the individual capitalist, uh, Cameron, but that they got to do that in order to survive. Am I right or wrong?
I agree with you. That's why we need a people's government to keep capital in check.
And
Scott, I mean, uh, go
as
ahead.
capitalism develops, not only does so there's this sense, I guess, in this myth within capitalism that the more capital develops and accumulates, the the more economies grow, the more they can meet human needs. But that's not true. Um, One of the things that I think we're seeing happening is um, increasingly as so Marx and Engels discovered the law of the declining rate of profit as well. So it becomes harder and harder to stay profitable and to kind of outdo the competition. Um, as uh, as the economy grows, what we're seeing is more and more um, things that are necessary, uh, basic food, housing, um, energy, things like that, more and more are becoming objects of price gouging. The growth of capitalism, the growth of the economy is not helping um, provide for people's needs. It's exactly the opposite. And that's just, again, something we've understood for a while, but as the economy grows, capitalists get more and more desperate, as Joe said, they need to make the maximum profit, so they turn to gouging um, on basic necessities of life, which means that people are going to die as usual uh, to prop up the capitalist system.
Rosanna, when I was a younger man, I once went to a commencement address at a college in West Virginia. I believe the name of it is Bethany College in West Virginia. And the speaker was none other than the chairman of the board then. I'm sure he's dead and buried by now. Uh, may he rest in peace. The guy's name was Roderick, if I'm not mistaken. And he said, and this was during the time that the mills were closing, and there were proposals for the workers to take over the mills. And he responded to that in his commencement address. And he said, the purpose of U.S. Steel is not to make steel or to provide jobs. The purpose of U.S. Steel is to make money, is to make money. And that's true with respect to housing. It's true with respect to hospitals, healthcare. It's true with respect to production of technology. And it's true with respect to infant formula. These guys aren't in the business to feed babies. They're in business to make money. What do you think?
I totally agree. That's exactly what they're in the business of is, they don't care about anything but what's going to bring them profit. What product can they invest in to bring them the highest amount of money back? Whether it's going to be beneficial to society, that's way down the road, down the line in their estimate. So most definitely, um, he was right.
And that's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem, Cameron, is that they are compelled to make the highest profit possible because their competition is doing the same thing. And it's a dog eat dog world, you know? And if they don't do it, they'll be driven out of business. You see the problem? And so the nature of the beast is that, they got to devour each other and us. That's why we need socialism. Cameron, that's why we need socialism. Yes or no?
I agree. I mean, definitely, these are parts of it. I don't know if I'm cutting. I'm losing some sound, so I hope I'm not interrupting.
No, you sound great.
Um, but yeah, I mean, definitely, I think under socialism, these kinds of uh, parts of the economy would be taken out of the whole profit motivation would be profit motivation would be taken out of it. You need to have these systems run to serve needs, not just make money, put into public control.
Absolutely. And speaking of the beast, and there was another mass shooting in Tulsa this week. 3 or 4 people were killed. And I think there were a number of other shootings. And I say beast because the same thing is true with respect to the arms industry. Their goal is going to sound like a contradiction in terms. It's not necessarily to kill people, but to make money off of the production of weaponry, Scott. And
Yes.
it is, and what are we going to do about it? We had a membership meeting on Tuesday, and one of the questions that people asked, and it was a damn good question, was what do we do in order to disarm uh, all of these people who are carrying out these kinds of atrocities, and including those who are threatening us with armed attacks for whatever reason. What do you do about that?
Is that to me? Uh, so
Yes.
yeah, we I mean, I think there is a profit motive there definitely for the arms industry, which is hugely profitable, and I think we need to see the link between the um, arms industry that is furnishing the weapons to these mass shooters and the arms industry that's furnishing the weapons that are used for imperialist domination throughout the world. And that's, other people have made that link, obviously. Uh, but there's also, aside from the profit aspect, there's also an ideological component to this. I really think that guns um, are as much an ideological tool as anything. The whole mythology around them serves to prop up this idea of like the lone warrior, the man who can use property and violence to enforce their will and their own definition of freedom. So pumping guns out, you're also pumping out, disseminating, reinforcing this myth of um, individualism and of the rights, the unrestricted right to use property to dominate other people, and that's part of it as well. Biden has now given a speech to Congress on sort of strongly urging an assault weapons ban, which of course I support, as I would imagine most members of the party do. But it's time to do more than urge, right? It's one thing to urge. Anybody can urge the use of this rhetorical pressure, persuasion, whatever. Um, but the presidency is not just a rhetorical position. This is a position of actual power that has to be deployed in real ways to not only prevent guns from falling into the hands of white supremacist terrorists, but also to disarm the ones that are already uh, are already operating. And it's hard to do that when you're at the same time saber rattling on China pumping weapons into Ukraine, right? To talk about gun control here and then be the biggest source of weaponry and violence in the world is a contradictory position.
Rosanna, I heard one of the senators who's involved in negotiations right now to do something about these weapons. And they are cautiously optimistic about coming to some agreement with the Republicans. And but the question is, what will that agreement consist of? And there's several different, components that they have pushed for. Like for example, a ban on assault weapons or background checks. And so the question is, and they're making the argument now, don't let the good be or don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Is it better to have a partial package now in the wake of what happened in Texas, or uh, should the uh, uh, imperative be to try to bring pressure to bear to get the in your opinion?
Well, I think every change has its process. And so, in order to really bring about change, you have to take it step by step. And so I think, that part of it is it's important to take that first step towards that. I think the other part of it is that, yeah, coming from what Scott was saying was, I think the other aspect of it is that people see shooting others or shooting as a solution to their problems, and so we have to tackle that as well. Some for whatever reasons they resort to shooting others, and then it's society that kind of perpetuates that thinking and that thought that you can solve things in 30 seconds or 30 minutes or whatever, but that's not true. So I think that's another aspect that we need to look at. But definitely banning assault weapons, we don't need them. what do we need them for? And many people are suffering from their loved ones being shot at or experiencing shootouts at a mall or at. I mean, I was blown away by the fact that there had been 20 more shootings between now and in the Texas shooting. That's that's just incredible to fathom.
It's just an ongoing wave of violence. There's an ongoing wave of violence, and Cameron, I think that the Communist Party needs to come up with a 3 or 4 point program for addressing the gun violence issue. Like, for example, point number one would be uh, and you have to deal with the cause of the violence. So, point number one would be maybe uh, jobs, because people are part of the problem is that there's the anxiety and the angst and the feeling of helplessness that people have. Point number two would be dealing with the drug crisis, because a lot of the violence is gun violence is due to gang warfare. You know, uh, point number three would be around an issue like background check and bans of assault weapons. So it seems to me like we need to put together 3 or 4, 5, whatever the number is, point platform for addressing this crisis. What do you think?
Absolutely. Um, and yeah, I definitely agree. You have to look at all the different sides of the problem and, deal with both root causes and symptoms. And it's a very, very, I think, deep problem in the United States, particularly. As Scott pointed out, it has a relationship to United States as a chief imperial power, that in and of itself has made the arm industries very powerful and politically powerful industry. Um, and definitely you have to address people's needs so that they don't feel desperate, and build communities so that people feel connected to each other.
Rosanna, I'm thinking
Another,
about moving to California because your state assembly has just recently issued a report uh, calling for the paying of reparations to victims of slavery in this country. Um, the People's Republic of California has, that's a big thing. Um, and that was the governor set up a commission, um, I guess about 2 years ago, to do a study. And that commission has made a report making these recommendations. And I was particularly impressed at the form that the reparations would take. For example, they're talking about paying tuition. Though I was surprised that it was to private schools, not to the public universities. I'm not quite sure why that's the case. Um, uh, Number one. Then they called for supporting housing and so on and so forth. So it seems that the direction is going to uh, assisting the institutional uh, forms of support that would uh, increase the uh, opportunities for equality. Um, it seems to be a pretty sensible way to go. What do you think?
I think it's a great first step. People would have to prove that they were descendants of slaves, which nowadays it is provable, even though slaves at one time were only numbers. But there is a way that has been created to detect that. And I think that California. I believe the California voters voted to put this task force together, if I'm not mistaken. It's a 500-page study, so I'm hoping to attend one of those sessions that they're going to have on summarizing it, because I don't think I can read the full text or possibly understand it all. But I think it's a great first step to be able to understand the effects that slavery and racism have had on people of color, and primarily black people. I think that it just does something for your outlook, for your your perception, and your ideas of what is really institutionalized racism and its effects that it has. So hopefully it moves beyond just the study and into enforcing it, putting things into place.
And that's the key concept, Scott, that Rosanna just hit on: institutionalized racism. And what do you do about addressing those kinds of issues? And the report is recommending, in addition to housing grants and tuition, health benefits, paid time off, increasing the minimum wage, protections for workers in agriculture, hospitality, food, and domestic industries. So it's getting at the economics of racism, which is really important, because racism, we always say, is more than the ideas in a bigot's head. It's part of the economy, or what we Marxists call the political economy of the country, or of the
Absolutely.
planet, actually.
I think,
Absolutely.
Joe, Joe, I think also that it's important for people to understand these are not giveaways. These are things that have been deprived, that people of color have been deprived of over years, and it has had an effect. And in order to be able to equal the playing field, these services are essential to do that, because we haven't
So,
had
and
those kinds of services available to people of color overall. So, and even less for black people.
in
Scott
a certain
Lozano
sense,
makes an important point, because there's the wage gap, for example.
and in a longer term perspective, all of socialism is about reparations in one sense or another. None of the wealth of the capitalist class rightfully belongs to them. It is all wealth that has been stolen. And the first and most brutally victimized uh, sort of the victims of that theft are the uh, descendants of enslaved Africans and the descendants of native people who were displaced and victims of genocide to create the wealth that courses through the capitalist class right now. But also, this is wealth that was stolen over generations from the working class. So, just emphasizing, um, as we consistently do, that the the struggle for reparations for African Americans, the struggle for reparations and political rights for Native people, um, are intrinsically linked to the struggle of the whole working class for socialism. This is a struggle to take back from capital something that it has stolen. Every worker should be involved in that, regardless of their race. Um, this is a great step forward, and it should be, as Rosanna said, it's a first step, um, but it's a powerful one.
To take special compensatory measures to address past discrimination, which is basically the essence of the idea, not only applies to Black folk, although there is a unique and particular uh, aspect of that, but it also applies to women who have been the victims of unequal pay for equal work, or for unequal pay for the same work, I should say. who are victims of the wage gap and housing discrimination and healthcare discrimination, um, and so on and so forth. And to do so is in the interest of the entire class, because to unite the class, you have to deal, Cameron, with the effects of discrimination on everyone, so that that doesn't become an obstacle to moving forward. Well, um, let's go to our mailbag. Uh, we have two questions. One is, how do you guys get through the day when the world seems to get crappier and crappier by the minute? Scott?
I think it's a question of our science, actually. I mean, dialectics is really a science of hope. Dialectics says that uh, the world isn't a fixed thing. It changes, and it changes. We can change it together, collectively, in a conscious and deliberate way. And that, for me, is a tremendous source of hope. The hope is, in some sense, the basis of all of, not just hope, but hope backed up with the possibility of real change is the basis of Marxism. Of,
But
like, we don't just understand the world, we change it. And um, that's what gets me through a lot of the time. But I agree, it's like it's getting harder and harder to watch the news.
Cameron,
it also helps us.
Rosanna, go ahead.
Yeah, it also helps us to look at the world in its entirety, not just focus on one aspect of what's going on. Because if you also look at the other side, or the fight back that's going on, the organizing that's going on, the changes that are happening, we just talked about reparations. That has been a struggle for decades, and it has slowly, reached this point. So we understand that everything is a process, and that we have to look at the whole picture, and that whole picture is what gives us hope, because we don't just focus on the horrible things that are going on. We understand that some of that is part of this capitalist system, and that the other part is the fight back that's going on, which is huge. It really is huge. So it's not always easy, but I think that that's, if we stick to that, that's what keeps us going through all this mess.
Cameron, what gets you through the day?
Can you say it again? I cut out a
What
bit.
gets you through the day?
Oh,
How do you keep on keeping on?
yeah, I agree with what Rosanna and Scott both said. I mean, a key part of it is staying involved in struggles, and staying connected to, being a part of the fight back. Um, if you're just sort of sitting and watching what's happening and only paying attention to the reaction from uh, capital and reactionary forces, then you're going to get discouraged and disheartened and frightened. But you have to keep track of also the fight back and also be a part of it. And also, I guess the other side of it is that keeping in mind that there's always ebbs and flows, and there's always points which with mass democratic and revolutionary forces move forward, and points where reactionary forces set back, and it happens unevenly in different points. So just remembering that, and remembering that part of the huge reactionary onslaught right now is related to the fact that capitalism is dying and trying to protect itself. And so the other side of that is that we're in a moment where as it's been said in the past, the new world is struggling to be born. So that's what we're trying to help make happen.
All of what you guys said, plus doesn't hurt to meditate 30 minutes a day, count your breaths, I counted 200. Doesn't hurt to exercise, help get you through the day, you know. And at the end of the week, you know, go out on Friday night or Saturday night and have yourself a beer or two and chill. That's not a bad thing. Make sure you limit it to one or two. Don't get drunk. If you do get drunk, don't drive. Take care, everybody. Stay strong. Stay safe. Stay in the fight. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Later, comrades.
Bye.